Radio presents The Truth Denied, Talk Radio, with your host, Roxy Lopez, where truth never lies. If you would like to speak with Roxy on the air, the call-in number is 347-327-9997. Here she is, your host, Roxy Lopez.
Good afternoon. This is The Truth Denied. I'll be your host today, Roxy Lopez. Our guest coming up right into this is Pamela Glasner, and she is the author extraordinaire of a wonderful book called Finding Emmaus. And this book, even though it's a fictional novel, and she'll get into this on the show, she'll explain this to us, it is historically factual and medically accurate. And it is part of a docudrama series, The Lodestar. It's a fascinating read. It's very thought-provoking for me anyway. Let's not waste a moment of Pamela Glasner's precious time. Welcome to the show, Pamela.
Oh, hi. Hi, Roxy. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, I appreciate this wonderful book, and eventually I'm going to have to send it to you when I'm finished, so that perhaps you can write a little something in it for me.
Oh, well, maybe I'll just have to fly out to Hawaii to get to do that.
Oh, you'll fly. Oh, good. Well, yes, we need to do that too, because there is so much. I do have so much to share with you about my experience in reading this book. But this is all about you today, Pamela. So where I would like to start with, for the listening audience, is a little bit of your background. Can you just sort of chart the way for us? Tell us who Pamela is and how we came upon, your background, and then what happened? How did you stumble into writing this amazing, wonderful book called Finding Emmaus?
Well, sure, I can do that. I actually it started out as a love story. I had gone to a silent retreat, and that is really what opened the door for me to look inside myself in a way that I never had. While I was at the retreat, I don't know, it was kind of a strange experience, because I'd never been to a silent retreat before, and I was kind of nervous about going there, because I talk a lot, like I'm always talking, so the idea of me being silent was kind of scary for me. But what I found when I got there, and we finally did go Friday night when we went into our great silence, what I found was that without all the external noise that we're always subjected to all day long, every day, once that was all gone, I became acutely aware of all of my internal noise. And believe it or not, in silence, that can be a lot louder than all the external noise that we're subjected to. And once I was able to get through that, I picked up a pad and a pen. I do all my writing longhand. I eventually type it, but I do all my writing longhand. I picked up a pad and a pen, and then for 24 hours straight, except for eating and sleeping and praying, I did nothing but write. I just wrote and wrote and wrote, and it was just this, not the novel, but this stream of consciousness. And when I got all of that out of me, at the end of all of that, I just suddenly said, oh my God, I'm going to go home and I'm going to write a book. And I didn't even know at that point what I was going to write about, but all of a sudden I'm going to go home and I'm going to write a story. And I started writing this story, and as I said, it started out as a love story. And I liked what I had written, but it didn't have that something to grab me. And I have this amazing painting in my house that was done by a wonderful artist. Actually, it's not a painting, it's a line drawing and it was done by this amazing artist from Tennessee by the name of Marita Parisi. That I had gotten it years and years ago, and it's of this elderly man sitting in a covered bridge in Vermont, and it's real. I mean, the man really did exist, and his name was Frank Solinsky. And he used to sit inside this covered bridge and weave baskets, and then he would sell them to the passersby. And I got this picture. Oh my gosh, must be 25 years ago. So he's gone now. I'm certain of it. And I'm standing in front of this thing that's been hanging in my house forever, and all of a sudden it occurred to me. I mean, I was just trying to think of, okay, what can I do to this love story? Because I knew I wanted to write about empathy, empaths. And for those of the listeners who don't know what an empath is somebody who experiences the emotions of other people as though those emotions are their own. There's no information attached to it. It's just the feelings. And I wanted to write about empaths and how they feel ostracized from society and isolated, because when you react to feelings inside yourself but have no idea where those feelings came from, you can have, dramatic mood swings, and you can act strange or what looks strange to other people. And so just being strange and being different is an isolating experience. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then you isolate yourself even more because you feel isolated. And so I wanted to write about what it's like to be different and be ostracized in our society. But I wanted it to be more than just a love story. And I'm standing in front of this picture, and all of a sudden I got it. I got the whole story in my head looking at this old man. I thought, that's Frank, and he's the father of empathy, and he wrote the book on it, and then the book disappeared into legend. It just disappeared, and then it fell into legend, and then it was discovered 300 years later by Catherine, who was at that point the heroine of what I had written up till then. And then I thought, okay, well, if the book disappeared, if he wrote a book and it disappeared, it has to have been gone for quite some time. I mean, if it fell into legend, it has to have been gone for quite some time. And American history is only about, 340 years old. So he would have had to have been a Puritan. And the story just kind of blossomed from there. So I created this entire person who was alive here in Connecticut, which is where I live, in a town in Connecticut in the early 1600s, and he himself was an empath. But of course, back in Puritan days, if you were acting strangely, they assumed that you were a witch or that you were possessed, and all of the horrible things that happened to him as he was growing up. And I'm not giving anything away, by the way, because everything I'm saying is in the first couple of pages in the book. And what I did was then a comparison between what it was like to be different and ostracized and victimized in the early 1600s because people thought you were crazy, and as compared to what it's like to be ostracized and victimized and different because people think you're crazy in the 21st century. And so basically that's how I came up with the idea of the book. It took me less time to come up with it than it just did for me to explain it all to you.
Right. It was yes, absolutely, and I appreciate the dialogue on that. Now, you brought something up regarding the 1600s and Frank's experience, and then the 21st century and the character Catherine's experience. Can we speak a little bit about that? What would be the differences, and then again, what would be the identifying factors that they possibly would have both gone through, even though there was a 350-year difference in their life spent in the United States?
Well, in Frank's time, if somebody, especially here in America, because if you remember, when people came over in the early 1600s, there wasn't really anything here. When they, well, of course, I mean, the Native Americans were here, but when the people came over here, they did not have the luxuries, that they did back in England. Anything that they wanted, they either had to trade with the Native Americans, although they referred to them either as Indians or savages. They had to trade with the Native Americans, or they had to build it, grow it, or somehow make it, or they did without it. One of the things that they had to do without was clergy, and another thing that they had to do without was the medical community. So if someone's even, and their culture was very, very much steeped in their religion, but they were very limited in terms of the number of clergy that they had here. So their clergy was kind of people who would travel around, from one church to the next church or a meeting house to the next one. They didn't, not at least down here in Connecticut, when they first came down from Boston, from the Massachusetts area down into Connecticut, which was in the very early 1600s, like 1620s, 1630s, they had to rely on sort of like a traveling, almost like a circuit judge. Well, this was a circuit priest. So they were very limited in that way. So if somebody was thought to be possessed, then they didn't do exorcisms very often anyway. They were Protestants, and they didn't do exorcisms very much anyway, but if you didn't have a priest, you for sure weren't going to do it. So if somebody thought you were possessed, there were two things they could do with you. They could either find a way to completely segregate you from society, because back then everybody believed that possession was, and lunacy, which were very closely related, were contagious. So you could actually infect an entire town if you weren't segregated. And if you could not be saved, meaning if you could not have an exorcism and get the devil out of you or get the demon out of you, the only other option was for them to kill you. So at least now I don't think that we're necessarily evolved, but we don't kill people like we used to.
Okay.
So, but we don't consider it to be contagious. I think people, for the most part, now understand that mental illness it's something that happens to you. It's not necessarily something it's not genetic, and it's certainly not like the common cold. You're in the room with somebody else who has strep throat. You're going to get it. So but the misconceptions and people's attitudes towards it, those really haven't changed very much. People who have emotional and mental challenges do end up being segregated from society, even if it's something that they do to themselves. They do end up they're different, and people have a hard time. Human beings, we're not really all that tolerant, and so people have a hard time dealing with somebody else's problems. So kind of, like I said, it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, it does. And, I was looking into this as well as I was reading the books. A lot of questions started to come up for me. And just in the light of, speaking of empaths, a little research I did, misdiagnosed with various emotional mental disorders such as autism, anxiety disorders, bipolar, Asperger's, and then they're prescribed therapy and pharmaceutical drugs for a non-existent mental disorder. So, you said something. I don't mean to challenge you, Pamela, but you said something. Back in the day. The 300-400 years ago, like you said, if they couldn't exorcise them, to exorcise the demon out of them or what have you, or isolate them anyway, maybe put them away so that they couldn't interact with society, hide them from society, if you will, they would kill them. And my perspective on today, what I'm seeing, and in reading these introspective, this emotion that your characters go through, and the true feeling of what it is like to be isolated or have these voices, or actually there's no the feelings that they experience, and they don't know where these feelings are coming from. And then in the current day, perhaps having a mate or family members who do not understand or relate to the empath, therefore they have their own way of ostracizing or their own way of outcasting them within even their own family unit, and isn't. And then they are taken to a psychologist or what have you, and they're given some drugs. So isn't that sort of a slow death of an empath anyway, if they never get to discover their gift of empathy?
Oh, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think one of the things that empathy seems to be defined kind of in the eyes of the beholder. And frankly, so do mental illness diagnoses. But just for this discussion, if you can imagine, and I know that you've read the book, but for those who have not read the book, just imagine walking down the street. This is the empath walking down the street, and they cross paths with somebody who is really, really angry. And it's not necessarily about proximity, but it's the easiest way to describe this. And so the empath would actually receive those feelings but not know that the feelings are coming from an outside source. And so they're just walking down the street minding their business, and all of a sudden they just feel anger. And because there's no information that comes with it, they have no idea where it came from or that it's not theirs. And there are ways for the empath to be able to identify, to distinguish between what really is theirs and what's not. But if you've never even heard of empathy and you've never been trained, then yes, it's just all of a sudden you're angry and you have no idea. And then this person walks away, and then 3 minutes later you cross paths with somebody who just got the job of their dreams and life is wonderful and they're just so excited and they're so high, and you slingshot from being really furious to all of a sudden you're euphoric. And what happens, one of the things that happens is that your family members, absolutely, if they don't know this, if they don't know what's going on and they don't understand it any better than the empath does, they don't know how to deal with it either. And the first thing the natural reaction would be, oh my gosh, we have to get this person some help. And help then comes in the form of a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Psychologists don't prescribe medication, but they certainly can refer to people who prescribe meds. And then absent the correct information on the psychiatrist's part, tremendous mood swings, the very first thing people are going to think of is, manic depression or bipolar disorder. And the truth of the matter is that there really is not, and this is outside my book completely, it really is so, there really is not a definitive test or a definitive manner of diagnosis for bipolar disorder. You can say, well, this person is behaving in this manner, therefore that's what in my professional opinion, and I've been doing this for a long time, this is what I'm saying this person is suffering from. But it's not like you can do a blood test for it. It's not a physical thing. You're never going to find it on an autopsy table after the person has died. It really is the doctor's best guess. And I know I'm simplifying it considerably, but the truth is that there isn't one. There's no specific test, and there's no specific. You can do it by a process of elimination. You can say, yeah, I've seen so many of these. But so that's why, if there's going to be a mistake, that's why there's going to be a mistake. Because if you don't have the proper information and you can't do a blood test or an X-ray or something like that or feel a pulse and find it, then I think what I really want is to make it clear that it's not necessarily, I don't want to go around pointing fingers and saying, it's the doctor's fault because they didn't find it. Everybody is working on their best information.
I do have a question in regards to that, Pamela. Is the medical community are they simply uneducated? In other words, and I don't want to put them down either, and that's not where this discussion is going. But does the medical community just simply not have enough information? For instance, do they deal on a case-by-case basis? Would the medical community be open, in other words, on a case-by-case basis to the fact that somebody may be a psychic medium or an empath or have these healing gifts, etc.? Do they even consider that aspect?
There are people out there who do. I am very good friends with a very, very well-known psychiatrist, and psychiatrist being somebody who is capable of prescribing meds. He's in fact, he's internationally known. And in all of his years of practice, the man is in his 70s now, and in all of his years of practice, he has worked with patients who have been on medications and has worked to try and get them off of them. But he has never, in all of his years of practice, started somebody on medication, because he really does believe that people's minds, people's emotions, people's souls, people's insides are capable of a lot more than we know. And if you understand what I'm saying, just because
I do.
Just because as a general rule in society, people don't accept telepathy or empathy or something like that, doesn't because they can't prove it, because it's not something that you can prove, but doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't exist, and it just might be something we cannot prove now, because when you think about it, I mean, it was just in the 20th century that even cardiac surgery became something that now people think, oh, someone's going in for, an operation on their heart. Of course, it's a source of concern and it's dangerous, but it's not uncommon. 100 years ago, nobody ever would have even considered, they wouldn't have even considered thinking about it, let alone consider doing it. So, just because we're not doing something now, I guess my point is that I don't think that the medical community, they don't react quickly. Things don't change all that quickly.
Correct. And what do you think the reason is for that?
Now, who wants to get sued? 100 years ago, I don't know. It's because I think just human beings in general. It's. I remember reading something about when anesthesia first was introduced into the medical field. There were lots of doctors who absolutely fought against it, and I believe that I think that was in the early 1900s. I may be wrong, maybe earlier than that, but there were doctors who used to pride themselves on the speed with which they operated, because that was what caused their patients the least discomfort. But there were a lot of people who were operated on in hospitals who did not have anesthesia, and those doctors fought against the use of anesthesia, for tooth and nail, because heck, if you can put somebody to sleep and not have to be speedy about what you do, then my skill set has just become obsolete. So I think there's a lot of human factor in there. I think in a lot of, I don't want to say in a lot of cases, there are cases of first do no harm being tossed out the window in favor of, first soothe my ego. And I'm not saying that about the entire medical community at large, because I know lots of absolutely wonderful doctors.
Well, yes, and I think I understand what you're saying, and the medical community is split up. We've got naturopaths, we've got westernized doctors, we have surgeons, we have psychiatrists, we have therapists. It's sort of all over the map. And I personally know a lot of people that are migrating towards a more holistic sort of beginnings in their life. In other words, the spiritual connection, the physical connection, the emotional connection, instead of one doctor, one way, one drug, and I do find that it's an easy fix. When I'm reading your book, this seemed to be the case, where the actual, and I do call it a gift. There was a mention in your book. Well, yes, of course. But as you mentioned earlier, if one is not trained In other words, a parent or a grandmother or an aunt who can be there in the beginning when you're a child and you're going through these episodes, if you will, or these feelings or these experiences. If you have someone to guide you or recognizes, because they themselves are an empath or a psychic, the grandmother, the mother, or the father, or whoever, if you can have somebody, if the child can have somebody assist them from the beginning, that transition of acknowledgement, there's a stunning paragraph in your book, and I would like to read it to the listening audience. This is one of the characters in Finding Emmaus that is in a situation where she is, for the first time, her name is Catherine, for the first time she is discovering by means of a friend who is explaining to her what he feels she is not, and he does not feel she is bipolar. He does not feel she's been diagnosed correctly. He feels that she's an empath, and he is raising these questions, and then he is also, within her, and he's giving her information about why, and supportive information for her. He is supporting the fact that he really does believe she's an empath. And there is a stunning, stands out, this paragraph jumped out. I read it a couple of times. Tears rolled down my face. Let's see if I can get through this without crying. And
I can't.
yeah, I mean, it touches you. It touches all of us as just being a human being on this planet, no matter what. And the paragraph before it says, it was at that precise moment that something shifted in Catherine. She was no longer incredulous. Well, maybe she still was a little, but more than that, she began feeling the glimmer of something she'd long ago given up on, had long ago stopped believing in. There are those who will try to tell you that love is the greatest motivating force in the world, that love is one thing that could compel even the most prudent or the most cynical of men or women to the lengths they would never believe themselves capable of under any other circumstances. And they'd be wrong. It isn't love that causes people to throw all caution to the wind, drives them to acts of desperation, or persuades them to believe beyond all reason in the utterly impossible. It is hope. Where did that come from, Pamela?
Where the rest of the book came from, and I honestly do believe that the entire book was a gift from God. I never, and I mean this, I don't like to use the words never and always, because for the most part there's no such thing as never and always. But I never had to, anytime I tried to think about what I was going to write in the book, or anytime I tried to direct it, those were the chapters that I ended up or sentences or phrases that I ended up going back and rewriting. As long as I stood 3 feet to the left of myself and minded my own business, the book pretty much wrote itself. I mean, if you can just imagine, it was almost as if I imagined it coming down into my head, down my neck, into my shoulder, down my right arm, into the pencil, and then eventually onto the page. I don't know where, I would say 90% of it came from. It was just, after I read that, I still cannot read that paragraph aloud. You managed to get through it, but I heard your voice change. I can't read that paragraph aloud without crying, and it's not because, I wrote it and I'm such a great writer. It's because it's just so true and so meaningful to me, Oh,
and it will be for me for the rest of my life. I mean, it is a stunning observation, and absolutely, and good for you. And it makes, it's a critical moment for Catherine in the book. I think what happened to me as the reader for those who are going to get this book, it is unbelievable. It is thrilling, and you just simply, I know you've heard this before, Pamela. I cannot put this book down, and when I have to put it down, I say, oh my gosh, when am I going to be able to pick it up again and continue to read? Because it is a fascinating, fascinating read, and you really have. I am inside at moments in the mind's eye of Catherine and Frank, your characters. So I commend you on that ability, that gift, that channeling, that wherever this came from book, because it really, there is no separation at times. I feel as though I'm perhaps reading my own journal. It's amazing. And
Thank you.
And I think that this is what it probably conveys and does for other people who have purchased this book now, and brings on perspectives that I hadn't thought of before. And this is what is amazing to me. I had no idea that empaths suffer this way. I had a friend in the 80s, a beautiful girl. Her name was Sheila. God bless her. She's passed. Beautiful. And she was diagnosed as a bipolar. And she had these gifts. She was an empath. And when we'd go to these certain meetings, these environments where other people were sharing in a fellowship type situation, she'd have to walk outside, and you're absolutely right. One moment she'd be crying, one moment she'd be elated, depending on the emotions in the room. Now, I knew nothing about empathy at the time, and unfortunately, neither did she. And at a ripe old age of 33, she committed suicide. And I don't want to see that anymore. That was hard for those of us who were close to her. I'm not saying that every single person out there that's been diagnosed has been misdiagnosed. What I'm saying, your book really brought me back to that time and that moment, and explained a few things, by the way. And I think it's going to open the eyes of many of us to realize that certain, even for our own selves, like even intuition. Even intuition can. My mother, when I was younger, and I'm very intuitive, I know you are, Pamela, would wonder where I was getting this stuff from and where I was getting these dreams from. And my mother didn't know where to put it in a box, and they took me to a doctor. And they wanted to know why I was having these prophetic dreams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't know what was going on. I thought everybody lived like this. Now, that's a question I'd like to ask you. In your research and in your writing of this book, does an empath feel how they feel, feelings of other people or anxiety or what have you, do they feel that this is how everybody lives? Or do they truly feel alone in this?
I think it's really a combination. When I was little, I remember hearing my dad say once, "Oh my God, she's crying again," and I don't think he was being mean. It was just that he really didn't understand what was going on with me, because I would experience things so deeply and I would pick up on things so much, and I had no idea why I was reacting emotionally the way I was. But I didn't have a frame of reference. I think even little kids, like children who come from abusive households, until they're out in the world and they start hearing from other people and they start talking about it, and other people start saying, "Oh my gosh, my mom or my dad would never think of raising a hand to me," and then they start saying, "Oh well, the rest of the world lives differently than I do." But unless if you grow up with something, why would you think why would you wouldn't have anything to compare it to as you're out there in the rest of the world, and then you see, oh my gosh, there are people who go through an entire day without bursting into tears, or there are people who go through an entire month and they don't come to work with a black and blue mark once, or you understand what I'm saying? So
I do.
I think it's a combination
Absolutely.
of the two. I think, though, that the biggest thing that you said, though, and the thing that really meant the most to me, I beg your pardon, in terms of my own personal experiences and in terms of writing the book and experiencing it again as I was writing, kind of like reliving everything as I was writing, was the word acknowledgement. Because I think that, I think that being acknowledged from the outside in, having other people say to you, yes, I see what's going on with you and you're not crazy, is, I mean, that's huge. Having somebody else, and especially somebody who's close to you. I mean, of course, people do get, amazing gifts from strangers all the time. But having somebody who means something to you say to you, I see that you're going through this, and I don't think you're nuts at all. I mean, I think that what you're saying is absolutely valid. I think that what you're experiencing is something that other people experience, and I mostly think that there's nothing wrong with you. And having that acknowledged from an outside source is, I mean, that's got to be the epitome of deliverance. And then to acknowledge it to yourself, which I think is oftentimes harder. Sometimes when people say to me, hey, Pamela, you're not nuts. But then for me to forgive myself, or for me to say, okay, for me to acknowledge that and believe in it and believe in myself, because I think we're rougher on ourselves than we are on other people.
Yes, absolutely, and I agree with you on that acknowledgement, that validation from an outside source. We do that every day with a lot of things in our life. Like I baked a cake and did it taste good? And the people that come to the party say it was the most fabulous chocolate cake I've ever eaten in my life. And then there's that outside validation, and then one taps himself on the shoulder and says, well, okay, I knew it. I just had to see it for myself. I just had to hear it. The crazy, the word crazy, I find that I have not come across an individual in my entire life as of yet that doesn't have a fear of either going crazy, losing their mind, or being seen as someone who is crazy. Why do you think that is?
Well, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with my priest to that exact same effect, especially when I was in the process of writing my book. When I write, I don't think that I'm Catherine, and I don't think that I'm Frank, but I've got both feet firmly planted in the story. I'm there. I'm just totally there, and I experience the feelings as I'm writing them, and so it's exhausting, and it's very, very emotional for me. There's one person in the book who dies who I care deeply about, and I was on the couch for 3 days crying because I was just so upset that this person was dead, But
wow.
I would sit, really, because I was writing, everything that I've written is real. Even though my characters are fictional,
yes,
it doesn't matter because the story is real. They're the archetypal stories, and then there's the real stories. The one story about the one character who was actually in Bethlehem Royal Hospital, the place that people think of as Bedlam.
Yes.
And what he experienced. And I don't want to give away anything that happens to him, but that's a real story. I mean, you can anything that's over 100 years old at Bethlehem Royal Hospital in their records, you can read. The public can read it. And I worked with with archivists from Bethlehem Royal Hospital and from the British Library and the British Museum and the Royal Society of London. I worked with archivists so that I would have real writings from real people from the 1600s. And so I collected data and I collected information, collected old drawings and everything. And so what I wrote there is absolutely true. So when I'm writing about people who are experiencing them, I might have made up a name, but this is real stuff happening to these people. And so it touched me deeply. I mean, it was just, it was just so intense for me. And I forgot your question.
That's all right. So did I. I could listen to you all day.
We're talking about acknowledgement and whatever, and I kind
well,
of
yes, and validation, and I think what we were discussing is why do people fear being seen as crazy?
Oh, that's
why?
right. So I would go back to my priest, and I would thank you very much. So I would go back to my priest, and I would ask him if I was nuts, because my thought process was, and I'm sure you've heard this growing up, that crazy people don't know that they're crazy, right?
Right.
Everybody around the crazy person knows that they're crazy, but the crazy person thinks they're sane. And I thought, and I would say to him, what if I really am nuts and I don't know it? And he would say to me, Pamela, people don't just suddenly, without any warning and for absolutely no reason, lose their minds. So no, you are not crazy. And I would say, oh, okay, thank you very much. And then I would go back and I'd write for another few weeks. And I'd go back to him again and say, are you sure? Absolutely positive.
Well, and isn't that a wonderful thing that you had him, number one, because he was, encouraging you, validating you, acknowledging you're not crazy, continue to write, and then so that you could push through that,
Mm-hmm. And not everybody has that. And
that's
even
true.
if you have it from one source, I had that from him. I didn't necessarily have that in other places where I needed it. And so, and that's what a lot of people go through. If a husband or a wife or a sibling or children, if I was a single parent and I had kids who thought that I was crazy, and so not only am I responsible for their upbringing, but now I think I'm nuts.
Right.
I can understand the despair.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings me to the next question here. I know that you do a lot of public speaking, and you've done book signings, and of course there are ways for people to contact you. Have you received any emails, or when you've been doing public speaking, questions from actual psychics or empaths?
I receive questions. Yes, questions when I'm speaking publicly. Emails. Yes, from people on all sides of the issue.
Okay.
I've been attacked for my views, and I've been complimented. I've had people say, oh my gosh, this is what my daughter went through. The doctors say that she's bipolar, but now that I read this is what I think she is. And I'll tell you, in a way that makes me feel grateful that I was able to speak out about the issue, but in a way it also frightens me, because when somebody is, and I think it's very important, I should have said this in the beginning, when somebody is on these medications cannot be stopped abruptly. And I'm not a physician and I don't prescribe, but what I tell people is that if you are inspired to take a look at the fact that your life may be different than what you've been told it is, there are people out there who can help you with that, but don't just suddenly say, I'm taking all my meds and flushing them down the toilet, because these are very, very potent and in many cases toxic drugs, and if you just stop them, you can literally die from that.
Yes, you can, I've known several people
I always
as well.
tell people,
Correct.
Right, you got to be careful. You got to be very careful.
You have to wean off of them.
You have to, right, you do. You have to wean off of them, exactly, and you need to do that under a physician's care. So you really do need to be careful. And if somebody is so inspired, there is information out there. The gentleman that I was referring to, the psychiatrist, his name is Dr. Peter Breggin, Breggin. And he's upstate New York, and he only takes patients from upstate New York, but he's got a wealth, if you Google his name, he's got a wealth of information out there and on his websites, and he's got and lots and lots of referrals, so that you don't necessarily have to live upstate New York to be helped. But he's a fabulous source of information, and he is an MD. He's a psychiatrist. He is an MD. So he's got a ton of information out there. His books are absolutely amazing. And if you want to take a look at an alternative to what you've been told all your life, he is an excellent place to start. And that's really what I've told people, because I cannot help somebody, I personally cannot help somebody off drugs. because that's a potentially very, very dangerous thing to
Oh,
do.
sure, it certainly is, and I've known many people who did decide to get off of whatever, whether it be an antidepressant or what have you. And you're absolutely correct, because there will be some changes as they get off of those drugs, and they're going to need some support during the process of. You know what I mean? I mean, of weaning
medical
off
support
of the
as well as emotional and psychological support.
Absolutely. So, yes, if anybody that is listening and is getting any bright ideas out there, do not just get off the drugs.
To come back to your question, though, and back to the word acknowledgement, I have had so many people send me emails or stand up in the middle of a speaking engagement and thank me and say, oh, my gosh, this is what's been happening to me, or this is what's been happening to my daughter, or this is what's been happening to the person I love more than any other human being on earth, and I felt helpless to help myself, or I felt helpless to help him or her, and now I'm seeing that, oh my gosh, this is something that, and it's common. It is so much more common than people realize.
I was going to ask you about that. How common is this? That's very interesting. So, do you think in today's society that, by the way, I just have to interject here. I think you're a wonderful facilitator. I really do. I just love you. But
thank you. This feeling is mutual. Thank you.
I know. You just surprise me. You surprise me, and you make me so proud of you. Even when we first met and you were just getting the book out, and I just thought, you're very, very special. I'm just very grateful and very honored to know you, Pamela. What did you expect, or what are your expectations, if you have any at all? Or in putting this book out into the world, and I know, by the way, you're going to be. This is a series, a Lodestar series. Are you going to is it going to be 3 books in the series?
Well, so far for sure it's 3, but now there may even be a 4th. But that would not be a continuation of the same story. And this is just what's going on in my head right now. It wouldn't be a continuation of the same story. It would be kind of an offshoot, because there are. I don't want to give anything away, but there are a few characters who are younger because, Frank is dead, so he's not going to age. But Catherine is already 54 in the story. But there are some characters who are younger, and I really wanted to explore what it is, how it affects younger people. I wrote Catherine when I started writing when I actually sat down and wrote Finding Emmaus, I was 54. I made Catherine 54 because those were my personal experience. I was experiencing her character, sort of through me. So I made her, long hair, just like I have, and 54, just like I was, so that I could more easily relate to her as I was writing her. But I really want to also explore what it is for somebody who's younger. So I've got a group of characters who are, kids, but that's just something that's kind of like in my head right now. I haven't actually done anything with it. But I'm in book 2. I'm most of the way done with that. And then I know the ending of book 2, which is going to be a cliffhanger ending, so I know that there has to be a book 3. So, but I just have the very, very general gist of book 3. I haven't written anything down about it.
Okay, and thank you. And I also hear that this is going to be a docudrama or a film.
Well, yes, that's what we're talking about. I've already got I've got 2 screenplays written for it right now.
Now, who's doing the screenplays? Are you writing the screenplay for it?
Oh gosh, no! Writing a screenplay is a whole different is a whole different set of talents. No, I haven't. I wouldn't even consider doing that. It's a whole new skill set. But I have a wonderful screenwriter, and she actually wrote 2. One of them would be like a 3-hour feature film or a 4-hour miniseries, and it's very, very, very close to the book, leaving almost nothing out. And then the second one would be a 2-hour feature film, which leaves out some of it because you have to sacrifice some. But it really does keep it's very true to it. I mean, it keeps the important stuff in it. So it would depend on which the producer wants to work with. And it was kind of an accident that we ended up with two, but so.
Yeah, right. I can totally see this as a feature film. As I'm reading it, even if I didn't know that it was going to be a film, I was already thinking this would be a great film, because because you're so great, you're so gifted at being able to convey. Like, you're such a great writer. I mean, I'm a fan. I'm a fan, Pamela, and I think I think a lot of others are going to be. You're my new author extraordinaire.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and that's a lot for me, because I don't. A lot of books I end up putting down in the first 3 or 4 chapters. Believe it or not, I mean, it takes a lot to keep me still enough to read a book. Thank you very much. And with that in mind, I was going to say, because of that. I had an incident happen a couple of days ago. This isn't about me. But it is, where my sister Danny, who was suffering from cancer, finally passed away 2 days ago.
Oh, sorry.
And I want you to know that the only thing that got me out of my body, out of my the phone calls and the planning of the funeral and all of this stuff, is your book. I mean, I even turned the TV on to watch a show, and I could not keep my mind on the show. I could not keep my mind. I listened to talk radio. I couldn't keep my mind on it. And I opened and that's why I didn't start with opening the book, because I thought if I can't listen to a show, I'm certainly not going to be able to read. And I'd open the book and I'd start to read, and you took me away. This book takes me away. So God bless you for that. I really mean that.
It's my God!
Yeah.
Thank you so much. What an amazing thing to say to me. Thank you.
From first word, my mind goes somewhere else. And I'm in the world of Emmaus, and I also want to know, if we could, we're going to be wrapping. We've got about 6 or 7 minutes left here. I was going to ask you, who's Emmaus?
Emmaus is actually it's not a who, it's a what. It is actually in the Bible. It's obviously not a religious story. But in the 24th chapter of Luke, there is a story called The Road to Emmaus. And in fact, I think I mention it in the book. It's a story about 2 men after Jesus was crucified, and then he was supposed to come back in 3 days. 2 men who had been followers of Jesus, they just couldn't take it anymore. They followed. They had been his followers. They thought he was going to come back. They thought he was their king. They thought he was their savior. And then they watched him be murdered in this horrific fashion. And they left. And they were going to a town called Emmaus, which was supposed to have been 7 miles away from Jerusalem. Well, nobody in 2,000 years has ever found one scrap of evidence to prove that there was a town called Emmaus. And so I just have my own beliefs about what that was. I mean, to me, it wasn't about geography. It was about they were just so devastated that they were going to the one place on earth where they felt that they could go back and find love and support and belief and humanity, and because that's what humans do when life becomes unbearable. You go to the one place where you feel safe, which is whatever you call home. And so that, to me, was what I was doing. Catherine is looking for, shelter from the storm. And that's what Catherine was looking for herself, and that's what Frank was looking for. And then when the two of them get together, that's what they are looking for everybody that they're trying to help, is shelter from the storm. So that's why I named it Emmaus, Finding Emmaus.
Right, Finding Emmaus. And thank you for that. Yes, I think that's wonderful. Wonderful that because it is the road to home, finding that sanctuary, if you will.
Sanctuary, excellent word.
Yeah, and I call it my Shangri-La, my sanctuary, and that is a deep place. This book is very deep. It takes us all into an inside journey. That's what I love about it. It's very quickly in the beginning of this book, after you read through I don't know, the first maybe 40, 50 pages, let's say. You're in. I know, as the reader, I'm inside a different world now, and I'm in this place that I can relate to them. I know every reader is going to, and guess what I was going to say as well is that finding Emmaus is really I think inside of all of us. We are all, whether empathetic, whether empaths or psychics or what have you, we are all on that road, aren't we, Pamela?
I think so. I think human beings just naturally gravitate towards that. We're all looking for that place inside ourselves. I mean, that's
where it is.
That's what everybody's journeying for. May I say my website?
I was just going to say, anything that you need to let us know where we can buy the book. I bought mine at Amazon, but yes, your website and any information, absolutely.
Well, it certainly is available on Amazon.com. It's also available online through Barnes & Noble, or you can go to your favorite Barnes & Noble, and if they don't have it on the shelves, they'll get it for you. But you can come to my website, and for people who want to order it directly from me, I'll sign it and mail it out.
Wonderful.
And my website is www.lodestar.com, and that's LODESTARRE. So, and Lodestar is actually a guiding principle, which is, that's what it's about, right?
Yes.
So.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
And I'm on Facebook, Pamela Glasner, too. So please come visit me.
Yes, and do you give out any email, or can that be contacting you through lodestar.com?
No, contacting me through lodestar.com is probably the best way.
Okay, that's fine.
Or Facebook, if you contact me through Facebook.
Our Facebook, yes, and Pamela is a friend of mine on Facebook. So if any of you want to connect with her and you can't seem to find her, her name is Pamela Pamela Glasner Glass. Oh, sorry, Glasner. I'm sorry. My God, it's been a long day and a long week already, and it is Friday, but it's all right. It's an honor. It's an honor to speak with you. It's an honor to have you come on the show. We will be making a small a video of this, the whole hour, the whole show, and we will put it on YouTube, if that's okay with you, Pamela.
Oh, are you kidding me? Thank you so much. Really. And listen, it really is. I'm honored to be on your show because I am so impressed with the work that you do. I've been so impressed with The Truth Denied for such a long time. I'm really, really delighted that you invited me. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that, the feeling's mutual. You were like, yay, I'm coming on the show. And I was like, yay, she's coming on the show. So everyone, please, thank you so much, Pamela Glasner. We'll talk to you again soon. God bless. May the force be with you. And that was Pamela Glasner from Finding Emmaus. Please pick that up at Amazon.com. Next week, Monday, don't forget to, with Jess Bernard, Miriam Delicato at the Blue Star Prophecy is the guest on Monday on the Jess Bernard Show. And our guest next week, Friday, on The Truth Denied will be Jeff Duncan, rock star Jeff Duncan, guitar player from Armored Saint. He's going to come on and speak to us a little bit about what he thinks about GMO and the rest of it. Isn't that interesting? So he has a tremendous amount of fans. Don't miss that. He's going to talk a little bit about chemtrails and his experience. So another fine day that has gone by. You have been listening to The Truth Denied. I'm your host, Roxy Lopez. Take care.